How's it going, everyone? My name is Alan Chao. I am the OT software specialist here at Turtle, and today I'm going to be giving an introduction to FactoryTalk AssetCentre. So quickly going over the table of contents and agenda that we're going to be going over today. We're going to start off with some background information and addressing the different type of problems and jobs that AssetCentre is supposed to go over. So we're going to cover why managing automation assets is important. Once setting up that background, we're going to go into an overview of AssetCentre's capabilities, as well as the architecture in terms of what components are necessary in order to properly set up an AssetCentre system. So let's first go into that first section of why managing automation assets is important. So in the modern era of industrial control systems, you see most organizations having hundreds or even thousands of different hardware automation assets that they need to track. This can span across many different types, whether that be different PLCs, your different HMIs, drives and robot configurations, your switches. You can imagine that each one of these hardware assets having their own project files or configuration files. So you can imagine that in turn, you've got thousands or even tens of thousands of different software type files that are related to your factory plant as well. On top of that, you've got different panel drawings, maybe standard operating procedures, recipes that you need to track completely. And so you can imagine that with such a large real estate of devices and software products or files that you need to track, you've got a number of different adverse effects that can come with such large systems. One of them being hardware, where most users admit to having a certain lack of awareness in terms of their complete understanding of the lifecycle statuses of their hardware equipment. You've got an adverse effect on technology, where having so many different types of devices in your plant floor, and with so many different newer cybersecurity policies and laws being brought up, users are being driven, and it's harder for users to kind of keep up to date the necessary performance and security that these newer cybersecurity policies are enforcing them to follow. So here's kind of driving home that point of all these recent new cybersecurity laws that are being passed that users now need to follow, whether that be making sure that they have the necessary archive capability for project files. Maybe they need to track the life cycles status of some of their hardware devices, if they need an auditing capability. These are now new issues that users have to track with these newer cybersecurity laws. And the last effect is human error, where human error accounts for over 23% of unplanned downtime. And without having the necessary auditing capability within your plant floor, you kind of have trouble tracking this human error and addressing the downtime that comes with something like human error. And so with these problems addressed or brought up, this is where AssetCentre comes in, and we're going to talk about the different main capabilities AssetCentre has in order to address these aforementioned problems. So FactoryTalk AssetCentre is going to act as your centralized information type software. We're utilizing these main capabilities in version control, disaster recovery, lifecycle management, track and trace, and security. You can address all those problems that we mentioned in that first section. So covering this first main capability in change and version management, this is AssetCentre's main way of tracking those software type files that you might find across your plant floor. Within the archiving version control, users can track and look at any of the different past versions within a project file from the very first version that they've got, and they can manipulate any of these different versions as well, where Some use cases and manipulations, maybe if you want to just view some of these past versions to see how a software file has evolved, you have the ability to do that within the AssetCentre repository. Maybe you want to bring up a past version of AssetCentre or of your project file and push it and make it your most up-to-date in your archive. You have the ability to move versions as well. So giving you that level of visibility and tracking for your software type files. On top of this version control, you've also got a way to secure these different programs where utilizing FactoryTalk directory, you can set up different user permissions that are necessary for their level of access depending on the role. And this is set in FactoryTalk directory. Next up, the second main capability is disaster recovery, where users can either automate the frequency of running different scheduling types like backups, comparison reports, or they can manually run these different disaster recovery schedules as well. So running these disaster recovery schedules, you've got a number of different recovery types in regular backups, where when you the output of a backup schedule that you run will be appended to the archiving capability that you would find in your version control. You've got other types like comparison reports, where you can track and compare the most up-to-date or honestly any archive version that you have within the repository and compare that to the live project version that you see running in a hardware device on the plant floor. And you can compare the differences between these two configuration files or project files. And finally, you've got a third type in the ability to monitor Rockwell Logix controllers and detect changes to those devices as well, where you can get changes like seeing remote mode changes, port configuration changes, constant tag value changes that can all be logged when you're monitoring those Logix controllers. So here's just to emphasize all the different types of devices that you can track using AssetCentre Disaster Recovery. Everything here is covered, or all those different devices that I covered previously, like those HMIs, PLCs, and drives, are all covered here, but there are more types of devices that are on top of that as well that you can track, whether those are third-party PLCs in Mitsubishi, Siemens, Schneider. You can track generic FTP devices as well, just to kind of emphasize the point that you've got a wide variety of devices that you can track through disaster recovery. I kind of want to cover the different type of report outputs that you can get that are dependent on the hardware asset that you're trying to track and run a report on. So here's just a couple examples of report outputs. This first one is coming from the comparison report that is ran on a Rockwell controller. So you can see that comparing between an archive version to the live PLC running version, you can see differences in controller tags, program changes, things like that. Gives you a very granular level of detail here and changes found. From that same report type, you can also get changes found in the ladder portion of the report as well, where it can show you the changes in each rung. So very powerful tool here to give you that high level of visibility and understanding how changes are made in your Rockwell controller. You've got other type of devices as well. So here is just an example of the configuration file that is found or ran a report on a configuration file in a static switch, where in red you can see the changes between the two files. And finally, you've got third-party devices that you can run comparison reports on, not to the same level of granularity, but utilizing their difference or their comparison application. You can still get a certain level of visibility and understanding comparisons between the live version and your archive version, seeing what changes are there. So the next capability that I want to go over is lifecycle management. So AssetCentre uses this capability, a prerequisite in order to have this capability, or sorry, let me backtrack. So lifecycle management is AssetCentre's main way of tracking the lifecycle statuses of those different hardware devices across your plant floor. In order to run your lifecycle management, this application or this capability is ran on and based upon a special type of asset that you can run a disaster recovery on within AssetCentre, and that's called the inventory asset or inventory scan asset type. And basically, when you run a disaster recovery and get the comparison report, it exports a special type of file called the RAAI file. And essentially, the information that you would find in this RAAI file, you can imagine it as a snapshot of what you would see in your FactoryTalk links. It essentially just shows you what the AssetCentre system can see and communicate to across your plant floor, and uh, the way and like parameters that you can set in order um, to see what uh, assets that you can be based on different communication protocols. So whether that be like CIP or SNMP, that's the type of information that you get from your asset inventory scan. So utilizing this RAI file, AssetCentre is able to compare that information from the RAI file to Rockwell's catalog of lifecycle information. And so then you'll be brought up uh, different information like the general life cycle status of different hardware models, for example. You can also see information on firmware revision, the life cycle status on that as well. Just some examples there. So here we're showing you a view of how you can see and organize and understand the information that you would get from your lifecycle management. So once you run or once AssetCentre is able to get that information for lifecycle, looking through the web client, you can get this dashboard view of the different information from that lifecycle capability. So from here, you can see things like the total install base, um, what ratio is Rockwell to non-Rockwell. You can see that overall pie chart showing you the general product life cycle to give you that visibility and understanding of the overall status and where your factory stands. You can see that firmware life cycle. So very good level of granular information here. And I do want to preface that, or I do want to emphasize that this dashboard view here is pre-configured. So when you run the installation of AssetCentre, it sets up an IIS-based web service. And with that IIS-based web service comes this dashboard. And I'm bringing this up just to say that there isn't extra engineering time that you need to get a very high level granular or high level view of understanding your life cycle capability or life cycle status of your plant floor. Another capability that I want to cover is operator track and trace. So within AssetCentre, you've got a number of different type of logs that you can find that are separated depending on the type of log that you're trying to track. So that could be things like system level events or user events, but essentially all these different logs are trying to say or trying to show who did what, where, and when. And from these different logs, you can schedule an ad hoc reporting capability where essentially you're able to track the entire history of these logs. And you can imagine how tracking these entire histories there can be a lot of different type of events that you can track. And so setting up these schedules, or while setting up these schedules, you can set up parameters in order to organize specific logs that you're trying to see, whether that be based upon specific locations, maybe a specific PC, maybe specific users that are making changes. You can kind of organize what type of logs that you want to see there. So going in more in depth on those different type of logs that we're trying to cover. First type of log is the event type log. Just trying to show you the huge level of information that you get from these logs. So within the event type logs, information that you'll find here is typically related to system level changes. So here you'll find things like agents checking in or checking out a project for you. You can track the workflow of different schedules that are being run within Asset Center. You can see how every single one of these logs gives a generic level of information, whether that be log time, source, location, a general message upon what event or describing what event has occurred. Continuing on, you've got audit type logs as well. This is more user-based changes that are being logged across Asset Center, where it'll show users changing things like the asset tree. It can even show changes like written changes to certain tags, maybe within your Vue SE projects, or changes made to your Studio 5000 ACD files. So this is a really powerful auditing capability here. And then finally, you've got your diagnostics and health log, where essentially from here, it'll keep track of the communication, or it'll keep track of communication between Asset Center system to the different controllers across your plant floor, different Rockwell controllers across your plant floor. And so you can see with these different type of logs, you've got a very high level of auditing capability and tracking for higher visibility in your plant floor. And then finally, I want to cover system application level security, where utilizing the FactoryTalk directory and security, users can enforce permissions per user that is necessary for their role. So within the directory, users can design user and group organizations, either based natively on the FactoryTalk users within this directory, or base it upon Windows Active Directory accounts. And based upon the organization that they've got or that they will set up within this directory, you can build on top of that policy rules that exist per every software product within the directory as well. And that is an Asset Center is part of that policy rule. And so within these policy rule sets with Asset Center, you can set different levels of access per those users, whether that be, for example, like only certain users can enter the design mode to make changes to your asset tree, or maybe only certain users can set up a file path for your archiving capability. The FactoryTalk directory and security just gives you that level of granularity in terms of securing your system as a whole. So now covering all those main capabilities, I want to cover the Asset Center components that make an Asset Center system work. So here's a high-level view of the different components within an Asset Center system. So at the core of the system, you've got your Asset Center server, which you can imagine as the brain of your system. This is going to be running on a Windows Server OS, so that you can connect to your repository database that's going to be running on a MS SQL server. The Asset Center server covers other jobs like handling and hosting those internal web services, handling securities between different PCs. So jobs like that is what the server handles. You've got your FactoryTalk Asset Center client. You can imagine this as the face of your system. So making changes to your asset tree can be done here. Scheduling different jobs, like maybe you want to pull something from the archive, that'll be done here as well. If you want to set up a disaster recovery schedule, all of these are being done within the client. And then finally, you've got your Asset Center agent, which are the hands of your system, where the agent will be the one that's actually getting those jobs that you've queued from the client and logged into the server. The agent will be the one that actually reaches those file paths opens the specific applications that need to be open to finish the jobs that have been queued within the client. And then finally, you've got browser support. This is just covering what browsers are capable for the web client version of the AssetCentre client as a separate viewpoint into your AssetCentre system. Continuing on, here's like a high-level view of the rule of thumb in terms of AssetCentre architecture and what the upper limit of agent and client count a single AssetCentre server can handle. So every single server can handle up to 100 agent and agent groups, in which each agent can handle up to 100 assets per 12 hours. So I've got a couple keywords here. For those who don't know what agent groups and assets are, agent groups are what you would use in order to properly organize what jobs you want prioritized for what agents. And then assets, you can imagine as any device that you would be running disaster recovery on within your system. So an asset could be a Rockwell PLC. It could be a VUSE HMI. It could be one switch. So that's what an asset would be. So going back to this architecture rule of thumb, you can handle up to 100 agent and agent groups, where half of them must be native native to the directory that the AssetCentre server is being ran upon. And then in terms of clients, you can have 350 total concurrent clients, where 150 of them are traditional application clients and 200 of them are those web-based clients. Then finally, I want to cover a example of a large FactoryTalk AssetCentre architecture, just to kind of go break down, I guess, the perfect example of what Rockwell says is the rule of thumb in terms of architecture. So breaking this down, you've got some server level applications across the left side here in your FactoryTalk AssetCentre server, your Microsoft SQL server, and your FactoryTalk directory. So the main reason why they separate these different applications into their own computers is to give users as many fail points as possible in terms of this setup. So you can imagine if I'm trying to run an update on a FactoryTalk AssetCentre server, and I need to bring that down, but I also have my FactoryTalk directory that controls my entire plant on the same computer as well, which may be controlling different VUSE servers. If I need to shut down that AssetCentre server computer, I'm also in turn pulling down my directory, which is stopping me from doing any work across my plant floor. So that might be a reason for why you want to separate these things in the best case scenario. But I do want to say that having these things separate is not a necessity. If you wanted to, you could have your directory, AssetCentre server, and SQL server all running on the same computer, but that's up to your choice. Continuing on, breaking up the different workstation computers here with your FactoryTalk agent computers, desktop clients, and engineering workstations. Again, you can have all these things all co-located on the same computer. The main reason why they separate this is so that the agent has as much processing power as it needs to be able to hit that 100 assets per 20 or per 12-hour uh, line that we were talking about earlier. The only prerequisites that I do have to say in order to properly set up your agents is that, or your agents and your clients for that matter, is that every only one computer can only handle one copy of an agent and client on that computer. And the other thing is that uh, on the agent that you're trying to run disaster recovery on, that agent needs the necessary applications co-located on the computer to run disaster recovery on specific devices that you're trying to track as well. So what I mean by that is, for example, maybe you're trying to run disaster recovery and a backup on an ACD file and in a Rockwell PLC. In order for that agent to be able to run To be able to properly run that disaster recovery, you do need Studio 5000 co-located on that agent computer. That application does not need to be activated in order for the disaster recovery to properly run, though, just to mention that fact. But yeah, that's kind of everything that I wanted to cover today. Any questions?
Well, you must have explained it so well, Alan. Thank you so much.
I guess so.
Apparently. All right. Well, thank you for joining Talk Tech with Turtle every other Tuesday at 10. Please join us for our next session, February 24th, on Armor Block 5000 IO modules. That's going to be presented by our automation specialist, Peter Burns. Thank you so much, everyone.